Hey everyone, I'm Amethescent, and I just made a game in 7 days for the 2025.1 Brackeys Game Jam. If you're new to the concept, a game jam is a timed challenge where developers create a game from scratch based on a theme. This isn't my usual art content, but game design has been a dream of mine for over a year. When I found out about this jam on the day it started, I decided to take on the challenge, not just to test my skills, but to push myself to learn more. Day 1. The theme for this game jam was Nothing Can Go Wrong, and I didn't immediately have any ideas. But after thinking about it for a bit, I started to come up with something. I thought of making a game where everything seemed perfect, maybe too perfect, kind of like a utopia, but it's hiding something. It's simply a mask. And in the game, you'd have to do something in order to unveil it and reveal its true nature. I originally wanted to make this game as a visual novel, which, if you didn't know, I have quite a bit of experience making visual novels, as I have made several before, some of which are released on itch.io. But my brothers encouraged me to challenge myself to make something more. So I instead decided that I would make some kind of platformer using the popular game engine Godot, which is an engine that I've been working in for a couple of weeks on another game. Funnily enough, I had recently followed a Godot tutorial by Brackeys himself to make a platformer, so I decided to use that as base. But back to the actual game. I decided on a theme of depression, with the utopia acting as a representation of an escape from a dreary existence. It acts as a shield, created by the main character to protect yourself and hide from the world. Then I had the idea of creating these imaginary friend type creatures that would represent different things, like protection and joy. And these creatures would try to prevent you, as the player, from breaking the illusion. And me, being the lover of character design that I am, immediately dove into developing these imaginary friends. I admit that I was rather excited about them, more so than I was for every other aspect of the game. I can't help it. It's simply in my nature to design. So I started to generate ideas for the roles and appearances for the imaginary friends, as well as starting to plot out the events of the game. Then I began drawing them. The Protector imaginary friend was the first one I designed, and one of my favorites. I originally wanted to make her some kind of golem, but somewhere along the way I changed my mind and decided to make her a shepherd instead. A golem would have been cool as well, but I really wanted the Protector character to have some kind of cloud-like appearance, and golems are usually blocky and hard, the opposite of clouds. Shepherd works just as well. A shepherd's job is to protect their sheep after all. I didn't want to just make her into a human. I wanted to combine her with some kind of animal. And I'm a bit ashamed to admit that sheep did not immediately come to mind when thinking of possible animals to combine a human with. I mean, it's so obvious. She's a shepherd, and I wanted her to have a bit of a cloud-like appearance. A sheep is so obvious. But I digress. I came up with it eventually, and that's all that matters. Then I designed the bunny, which represents comfort. I wanted him to be a stuffed animal that had a tattered, broken-down look, showing that he's a bit old and well-loved by a child. And I drew him blue, since blue is supposed to be a comforting color. Day 2. Day 2 was a big one for development, even though I was busy with non-game related stuff, and that includes editing my last YouTube video, which you should totally check out if you haven't already. Despite that, I managed to lay down a lot of important groundwork. I finished up the overall plot for the game, which was a relief. I'm notoriously bad at coming up with complete plots for my games. It's a major reason why I always end up abandoning my ideas or putting them aside. Perhaps it was the pressure that helped. I was also able to design the character representing joy in about an hour, and using the tile set from the Brackeys tutorial as a placeholder, started to block out the map. And most importantly, I wrote the code for the interactables that would appear in the game, namely NPCs and objects that could be picked up. And, well, let's just say that it was hard. With my limited experience in Godot and its respective coding language, GDScript, I struggled a lot with figuring out how to make everything work, and I had to learn a valuable lesson, that it didn't have to be perfect. I was trying my hardest to try to understand everything and format everything in the most efficient way. But that doesn't matter. When you're participating in a jam, it's okay if your code isn't the neatest. That can always be fixed after the jam is over. I had far too many other things that needed to be done to be worrying about whether my code was perfectly compact. And I can always do better in my next project. The last thing I did that day was work on the opening cutscene. I spent an embarrassingly long amount of time working on it. I didn't fully understand how to make them using Godot's animation player. Not only that, but I tried to define every single part of the cutscene in separate animations, and then add code to play them all with the right timing in between. It was a headache, and I resorted to looking up a tutorial, which made me come to an embarrassing realization that I could just compile all the parts of the cutscene into 1 or 2 animations. I really wanted to finish the cutscene that day, but it was getting late, so I had to go to bed. Day 3. On day 3, I finished the designs for all the characters, as well as their sprites, with the last one being the character that represents companionship. And this character specifically is special. When I designed him, I based him off of a drawing I created several years ago of this fox-cat looking thing. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I thought it would fit. Then I decided on whom the main character would be. This is Lily, and I didn't actually create her during this time. I made her maybe about a year ago for a previous project. She already had the proper designs and sprites that I needed for the game, so I knew it would be easy to seamlessly implement her. I also managed to finish the introductory cutscene. Day 3 was also the day that I started to work on the code for an NPC that's meant to follow the player. And let's just say that I had a few problems. I eventually got it to work decently well. Not perfect, but good enough at that moment. I decided to come back to it later for some fine-tuning. And this was the point that things finally started to come together. I finally began to understand the engine better and work more smoothly. I promptly set back to work blocking out the map. I only really had vague ideas of how I wanted it to look, so I was mostly just making it up as I go, placing down events and pickups as I progressed. Days 4 and 5. Days 4 and 5 were the days when I started to lose some motivation. After 3 days of working basically non-stop, burnout was inevitable. But I pushed through and continued working. A lot of art was done over these 2 days. This includes the map's tile set, which consists of individual blocks that appear in the level. I also drew expressions for each of the characters and created a walking animation for the companion sprite. After that, I redrew Lily, because the old drawing was made a year ago and looks a bit different from my modern art style. And finally, I was able to finish off the script, the layout of the level, the main gameplay, and one of the endings. It sounds like a lot, and it is, but it wasn't difficult, just tedious. Days 6 and 7. Days 6 and 7 were the last 2 days I had to work on the game, and up until that point, I was seriously worried about whether I'd be able to finish, and I was questioning if my game was good enough or fun to play. But at this point, it was too late to go back. Fun or not, I had to finish the game. So on day 6, I finished off everything that had to do with the base game, including implementing the rest of the narrative as well as the final ending. And back to the companion that was having trouble following the player, I finally fixed it. Sort of. You see, the problem I had was that I couldn't get it to follow the player while the player was jumping from platform to platform. It would always fall off or get stuck. So to fix this, I took away its ability to jump. So now, it can only follow you at the bottom of the map. Not exactly what I wanted, and I had to rework some of the story to accommodate it, but it works with no extra errors or problems. And with that, I was done, and free to add things that aren't necessary for the game but make the game better overall, such as giving the characters voices and giving them colored names. Ramona for the sheep lady, Buttons for the bunny, Swirl for the fox, and Joy for the pixie. Special thanks to my brother for coming up with the names on the spot when I asked him to. I was pleasantly surprised with what he came up with. I specifically wanted names that a child would come up with for her imaginary friends, and I think the names he chose are perfect for that. On day 7, I had my brothers playtest it and specifically look for any errors that would completely break the game. It also served as a way for me to see if the gameplay itself was fun and that it made sense what you were supposed to do. Luckily, they only found a few things that were wrong. Nothing too major and nothing that would break the game, but problems nonetheless. I was relieved that they weren't too difficult to fix. And after all of that, I was finally able to submit my game 10 hours before the submission time, with no errors exporting and uploading to itch.io. And other than a few other bug fixes, that's all. The game is called Everything is Okay, which is ironic because everything was certainly not okay while I was making it. But it turned out okay in the end. And as of me writing this, people do seem to enjoy the game a lot. If you're interested in playing my 15 to 20 minute game, I'll leave a link in the description. Feel free to play it if you're interested. I worked very hard on it. It's playable in your browser, so there's no need to download anything. So anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already to see more of my content. Take care and farewell.